take the portfolio from Blackboard and export it as a pattern that you can then take with you, or, you know, in that sense.
As far as the comments go, we're all aware now to keep track of those, but what happens with the people who choose that option for courses previous that may not have those comments anymore?
Well, part of what this process is the students making their decision about, do I have what I need in order to do the portfolio? It might not work for everyone. If you've got one class left and you didn't keep any of your papers, you're probably going to have to take the exam. So, you know, what we're doing is trying to give you enough information so that you know, this is what I need for the portfolio. I don't have those things. I wanted to choose the exam. So, just because it's an option doesn't mean you necessarily should choose it.
Okay, so if you don't have all your comments, then that's a massive issue, or how big of a problem, how necessary are the comments for everything you turn in for every course?
For the fall semester, it's not a do or don't issue. We recognize we have to be flexible. For students entering in the fall, they will need to keep comments from each of the assignments that they plan to include in their portfolio ultimately.
I had one where I had a class that I went to here. I got things turned in physically, but for the rest of my online classes, I turned them into electronically, and I know that probably the teacher might have graded it, made comments on it, but I don't know where to find those.
You would have found those while you were actually enrolled in the course. Professor Miller was saying that as you look at your grades, there's often a place for comments.
Okay.
Or if the instructor has returned the assignment electronically, they may have included comments in the paper. So those comments would either be on a response from the instructor, possibly through email, or in Blackboard.
Shouldn't it also be possible for somebody who has received back a written paper with comments on it to just
Scan that in as a PDF, yes.
The issue about including work from your area of specialization, that's kind of a big issue for some students because I don't think everyone purposefully chooses an area of specialization as opposed to just doing a broad general library science. So
That might be your specialization.
So instead of including those things, then just explain about it and choose things that you like.
Well, you know, your goal to come here was to get a broad general education about library science because you don't know if you want to do public libraries or if you want to do academic libraries. What classes did you choose? Why did you choose them? And what were the assignments in those courses that, you know, added to that? So maybe you chose collection development as a course because you felt like that would play well in a number of areas. So take one of the assignments from there and talk about in your rationale for that piece. I'm doing a general broad-based education. I chose this class because I felt like it worked for a number of areas, and this piece was really good because it did A, B, and C.
So we're doing the core courses and then a few extras of our choice, either area of specialization or something that we think is relevant to our portfolio as a whole. Okay.
Yeah, and you know, the other thing about selecting items for the portfolio, and it says in the guidelines, you do want to be selective. You don't want to throw in everything you submitted while you've been in this program. You want to select items that demonstrate good things about your knowledge. You know, pieces that are a little bit more thoughtful. You know, if you think about a 10-page research paper that you've done as opposed to a 5-question exercise that you've done, you know, obviously. So being very selective in the items that you choose to include in your portfolio.
And actually, each of your courses should have learning outcomes tied to them, and hopefully you choose things that demonstrate that you've attained those learning outcomes. That's a good way for you to think about how to select what you want.
And think about it also in terms of your professional goals. If you say that you want to work in an academic library and you didn't take any courses related to academic libraries or instruction or things that you would really need to know to work in an academic library, instead you've taken, I don't know, history of the book and you've taken special library topics and a health sciences course, that's really not going to be a very good demonstration of how you're going to meet your professional goals.
Sir, what are the ramifications of this professional portfolio versus exam?
There aren't any. The professional issue is whether or not you have a degree.
Since we are choosing artifacts from our coursework, it sounds like it is like the final paper for a class or the final project. After the course finished, if the professor says a comment, you did a good job, how much work after that course do you need to work on it? So up to you and your advisor. For example, obviously if they say use AP instead of MLA, we'll switch that, edit that out. But if you have a good paper and you're happy with what your project is that good for the portfolio or?
You know, sure. You know, if you've written a paper where the instructor basically has no constructive advice on how to make that better, you might submit that as is. So, sure.
The converse of that, is it also possible to take a project that you think would be really relevant and you want to include that you didn't do well on and completely review it and include it in your portfolio?
I think that could be very possible. You might, you know, one question that I would ask myself is, do I have the time and the resources to devote to redoing a poor project versus how relevant it is to the portfolio? So you certainly could do that, but I don't know if it's a good decision. That's probably a different question.
I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit more as to the thought process behind switching from comps to portfolios. I mean, like for those of us that are kind of leaning maybe towards taking comps, they're going to be like any detriment because we decided to take comps instead of portfolio? Or?
Now, it really is more, from your perspective, it's really more of a question of which measuring device that you prefer. You know, we will continue to give the exam until everyone who is currently in the program graduates, but you know, there won't be any negative ramifications from selecting the comps, other than what exists already.
Are there any specific advantages to having a portfolio? Like what could we do with this after?
You can certainly talk about it in terms of, use it in terms of job interviewing. I mean, you will have already drafted your professional goals and objectives. What do you plan to do over the next 5 years? Where do you hope to be? Those kinds of things. Here's what I plan to do to actually attain my goals. Here are some examples of work that I completed during the program that are in line with my ultimate goals.
I've taken 2 courses already that I think would fulfill the technology requirement. And my experience with those courses is that there's not necessarily a final project, but projects along the way, whether it's leading up to just more skills in the aspect of the learning, or just this topic. What are you looking for the technology example of coursework? Because that just doesn't seem to be full as easily as a final paper or something.
Well, you know, what you're saying, I think, is part of the answer. If you want, perhaps one of those courses you want to show a progression of skill development. So you might select 2 or 3 different items. You aren't limited to one item per course. And if the courses are such that they're kind of a building process, then you might demonstrate that with items.
And to go back to what Professor O'Connor said, you should be able to link that back to learning outcomes for the course.
I mean, just to comment on the technology course that you choose, I mean, obviously many will take 636 as the course, but not everyone takes 636, which is why it wasn't specifically required as part of, a core view. But I do think, as has been mentioned, there are learning outcomes, associated with all those technology courses where you would have some very good products that I think you could use as evidence of achieving those learning outcomes. And to kind of touch back on what Anthony was asking, part of that process was, for instance, to build web pages. Not only do you have the ability to point to a URL as a link, but also you could print a source code view that would show that yes, I've learned how to work in JavaScript or HTML, and also a print of the actual product as it appears in browser. So I mean, there's different kinds of evidence that could be provided.
The checklist says 1 to 3 examples of work from each core course, and I was curious, since we're talking about 636, we had to maintain a website that it links to each of our projects. There are 5 or 6 links. Should we submit the website? I mean, it's
again, I think, even though we have to encourage you to be selective, there's also, the flip side of that is you can have multiple pieces of evidence associated with the course. And so in my view, the web page in which you have those links represents one of the learning outcomes, that is to be able to do that and make the links. But one of the links, for instance, goes to an Access database, which shows that you've mastered something about database construction. So I would encourage the idea that you would maybe have some of the reports that were generated from the database itself, and then as a rationale, you could explain, well, an important outcome was to learn about database construction and design. Here's the evidence that I achieved that. So, I wouldn't necessarily rule out, having evidence that represents important pieces of each learning outcome.
I would also just like to point out that these are the conversations you want to start having with your advisor. What are the best measures here? And those are what your advisor can make decisions. Because it will be individual in some cases.
Okay, so talking to your advisor, so you gather up assignments and then you talk to your advisor about what would be best to put in there, or what? I'm still not quite. I still quite understand this. Because I know we're picking, us as students, we're picking up the assignments, we're making sure we have feedback and stuff, but I wish I knew how to best phrase it, but is it best to go to your advisor so you can talk about how to set it up, or what?
Especially if you have questions.
Well, relevant to that, I think, it seems like there's some obvious choices among the core courses, where the Pathfinder that's created for 601, and the thesaurus that's created for 602, the term paper for 600. It seems to me that those are the obvious places that are, where the project is of enough substance and length to show what you can do.
Are we getting feedback from just our advisor, or can we send out the portfolio draft to all faculty who will look at it?
I would probably advise against that, because they will be responsible for reviewing all of their advisee files, plus every faculty member is assigned as a second reader to other advisees. So any given semester, they will be looking at several.
In the original email you sent out, you asked us to go to this link and make a decision about whether or not we wanted to do comms or portfolio. If we decide to do the portfolio and then start talking with our advisor and find out this is not the best option for us because we don't have the work or the feedback or whatever, would it be possible to go back and then say, okay?
Yes. Yeah, just let Bill know which option you plan. That would just help us plan for fall. Are you hungry, Donald?
I think that's
Round all the questions already.
All right, so I'm going to put or you put these in your portfolio.
Baked items are acceptable. Drop them off in my office.
If we have an elective course where maybe not our final project highlights something that we want to showcase, can we do like a midterm project or something else?
Yeah, and Professor Pace was talking about those final projects, especially in the core courses, those tend to be kind of, culminating big picture kinds of things. That may not hold for every class that you take. And then back again to